We're moving on to our next set of presenters, group 4 presenters, and we're going to begin with Mr. Juan Cheaz Pelaez. I hope I got that right. My Spanish is not up to par. And he is the Trade and Market Officer of Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you're not as hungry as I am at this stage, but I see that there's some food coming to the table to ensure that our food and nutrition security is taken care of. On a more formal note, good afternoon again. Dr. Powell, thank you for the invitation. Honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. When I was invited to this forum and I saw the different stakeholders, the different organizations, I wonder what am I going to say in terms of doing agribusiness. Everyone that's their business. They're all experts in agribusiness. So it would be very difficult to try to preach among bishops. So what could I say? And FAO, and particularly from the stance of FAO. FAO is normally seen as an organization that is working maybe with human rights, with poor farmers, and doing developmental stuff that are very far detached from business. Well, FAO, is much more than that, and has been dramatically changing in the last years. And what I'm going to share with you in the next 4 to 5 minutes is what we have been doing, specifically in helping Jamaica develop the spices sector, with particular reference to ginger and turmeric. We have set out to move away from the traditional approach that was focusing on making analysis, on developing documents that were put to no use. And we have developed a new applied value chain development approach where the focus is on developing evidence, on generating evidence for planning interventions that would help move agricultural industries forward into the future. We believe that an ideal way to do that is through this applied value chain development approach. The difference with this approach with what has been done so far is that, as I said, it is using data, it is using information and evidence to make decisions. It is also, and most importantly, and I'm happy that the question came in the previous, to the previous panelists about the issue of water. It is about taking a more holistic approach to the work that we're doing. It's not only looking at production, it's not only looking at aggregation, not only looking at distribution, marketing, and consumption in a separate and a silo way. It is about having this integrated view and understanding how the different players along the value chain need to work together. Therefore, you would see in the presentation the emphasis that I'm going to make on collaboration, specifically on the building of public-private partnerships. In the case of Jamaica, we started by helping the government to address a very specific issue, which was the rhizome rot in ginger. 3-4 years ago, we had a problem with the rhizome rot that had basically decimated the ginger industry and had brought production from the level that it was to the level that it was around 2015 to less than half in about 5 years. So it had basically destroyed the industry. As you know, Jamaica was and is still well known for the characteristics of its high quality ginger, its pungency, and its highly demanded and desirable product. So we helped the government, we provided technical assistance to address this issue of the rhizome rot and to produce, clean planting material. Support was given, in Europe, and this material was made available to the government. But when we did that, we said, okay, now we have this clean plant material. We have a great opportunity. What is the market opportunity that exists for ginger in Jamaica? Most of you would be surprised to know that of the total market demand, local market demand in Jamaica, 95% is for fresh ginger, 4% is for some sort of value added, mainly used in beverages. But where the real value is, which is in the oleo raising and in the nutraceuticals, we have zero participation. Okay. So with that evidence in front of us, we say, what can we do to try to revitalize, to reposition the ginger industry in Jamaica? And that required that integrated view, and it required a collaborative view among different players, from the government, including from research and development, including from plant quarantine, including with one of our key partners in this effort, which is the Jamaica Agricultural Regulatory Commodity Authority, JACRA, who has been instrumental in working hand in hand with us to address this issue of promoting the ginger value chain. So it was fundamental to work, with all these players. It was also important to think what were the untapped market opportunities out there. And I like to really emphasize the untapped market opportunities, meaning what were those gaps that were still out there that could be filled. And our analysis and our estimation shows that there is a market demand for ginger of around 18,000 metric tons for ginger, whereas we're only tapping around 10% of that. So the potential is there. Once we've seen that the potential is there, and once we've seen that we had an opportunity by addressing this critical issue of the ginger rhizome, then it came the time to identify potential private sector partners that would be interested to work with us in driving the chain, not only to serve as buyers, in the traditional role, but to work with us by helping us understand better the structure of the industry, the demands of the industry, the standards, also to work with us to complete very thorough cost of productions analysis that would be the basis for developing the profitable business models that everyone has been advocating. This profitability, understanding what is, this is fundamental. So we work with private sector to understand and fine tune what these costs of productions were. And therefore, that was a step to build these business models that would give us a sense of the profitability in the sector. The process has been a 3 or 4 year process starting in around 2018. And the situation is that we have launched a pilot in 2020. We have set out to produce around 20 metric tons of ginger with clean planting material, which are in the process of, are being planted. And the first initial harvest is expected in December 2022. Based on that experience, we also saw the opportunity to work in turmeric. And we very quickly, we didn't have to go through the whole process again, but we initiated the same process, also working hand in hand with JACRA. And we have started a pilot last year in March. And by the end of last year, we have been a bit delayed because of the pandemic and other issues, but we're expected to have the first harvest of a pilot with 10 metric tons of turmeric. So that's where we are at the moment. The most important gain in this process is that we have worked hand in hand with many players, including for the government. We have transferred the technology for developing the business models, for also supporting production, this issue of the rice rod. Innovation and technology had a critical role. We imported innovative technologies from India, specifically the single bot technology, which has helped us reduce prices, almost half the prices of production, and at the same time, it has helped double yields. So that's the ideal world. We're reducing costs, we are increasing production. The experience has been successful and is attracting the attention not only of other players in the industry, but also other developmental players. And for example, the USDA has recently opened a tender for continue to support the ginger and the spices industry in Jamaica, where they expect to invest around 20 million. This is possible because they see that there are opportunities to invest. This didn't happen, because they want to work with ginger. So they've been talking to us and they say, trying to learn from the experience. That to say that if there's good work on the ground, there's good, market potential, there's good business modeling and profitability, the finance will come in sooner or later. Finally, to close, the experience that we have had in Jamaica is serving as an example in the rest of the region. In my role as Trade and Markets Officer for the Caribbean, we are scaling up and we are repeating this process, not repeating, we are using the lessons of this process to develop nascent industries with high potential in Belize, in St. Lucia, in Dominica, and in Guyana. And we are at the process in there where we are very soon going to be launching pilots in a similar vein and with the similar tools and approaches that we have used in Jamaica. Thank you.
Our next presenter, Mr. Owen Scarlett, Senior Director, Agro Parks and Production Zone. Mr. Scarlett.
Moderator, I want to thank you for inviting me to the podium. Distinguished guests, sponsors, fellow colleagues, good afternoon. No region in the world will be spared from the immense threat to our interconnected food system, climate, and the natural ecosystem upon which they depend. These are words from Sean DeClean, a member of the Executive Committee and head of the Food System Initiative, World Economic Forum. The world is facing a new era of rapidly increasing food price that can push almost 2 billion people into hunger in the worst case scenario. This is however due to climate crisis. But farmers are not sitting idle and are trying to adapt. Food security implies that all people throughout the world, including the vulnerable group, such as the rural and urban poor, always have access to adequate quantities of safe and nutritious food to maintain a healthy and active life. Ladies and gentlemen, food security is a right that should be embraced by all countries, irrespective of their level of technical, economic, and social development. Food security is essential to a country, but it is challenged by factors such as slow pace in technology development and inadequate planning, and by improving these factors should contribute to improve food intake and less hunger. Ladies and gentlemen, climate smart agriculture technology is an integrated approach to managing landscape, cropland, forestry, and fisheries that addresses the inter challenges of food security and accelerating climate change. My fellow colleague, climate smart agriculture technology aims to simultaneously achieve three outcomes. One, increase productivity, enhance resilience, and reduce emissions. By increasing productivity, this means by producing more and better food to improve nutrition security and boost income, especially for 75% of the world poor who live in rural areas and may rely on agriculture for their livelihood. Enhance resilience, reduce the vulnerability to drought, pests, disease, and other climate-related risks and shocks, and improve the capacity to adapt and grow in the face of long-term stress like shortened season and erratic weather pattern. Reduce emission is to pursue lower emission for each calorie or kilo of food produced. Avoid deforestation from agriculture and identify ways to absorb carbon out of the atmosphere. While we build on existing knowledge, technology, and the principle of sustainable agriculture, climate-smart agriculture is distinct in several ways. One, it has an explicit focus on addressing climate change. Climate-smart agriculture technology systematically consider the synergy and trade-off that exists between productivity, adaptation, and mitigation. Climate-smart agriculture technology aims to capture new funding opportunity to close deficit in investment. My fellow colleague, the Agro-Investment Corporation, through the National Agri-Park Development Program, aims to increase the economic inclusion of youth and women in the agri-parks and production zone to practice climate-smart agriculture technology to maintain environmental sustainability of the agri-food value chain. The corporation objective is to strengthen climate resilience across all four dimensions of food security: availability, access, stability, and utilization. This is specifically, it will promote precision agriculture, improve extension service, and climate-smart agriculture practices. Success of climate-smart agriculture technology so far in the agri-park and through irrigated land that have led to increase in agriculture production. The main objective of irrigation technology program is to improve productivity of water use and the respective parks. There are testimonies to show that climate-smart agriculture technology through irrigated land had contributed to increased agricultural production, employment and income, higher living standard, and a positive environmental outcome. Ladies and gentlemen, as of 2021, high-efficiency irrigation systems have been installed covering over 1,700 acres of land in the agri-parks, with installation of a further 1,500 acres in progress for the 22-23 financial year. My fellow colleague, in concluding, the transition to climate-smart agriculture technology will require significant investment and policy changes across the food value chain. Farmers, retailers, investors, and consumers, each needing to act in order to further enhance agriculture production. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Scarlett, Senior Director, Agro Parks and Production Zone, Agro-Invest. Moving on quickly, next presenter is Miss Selvine Stephenson, Manager Strategic Planning, also Agro-Invest. And she'll be presenting on domestic markets and marketing systems.
Thank you, Anne. Distinguished guests, Sponsors, colleagues, a good day to you all. Let me begin by expressing my sincere gratitude at being given this opportunity to speak briefly on the topic of domestic markets and marketing systems. With regards to domestic markets, there are several avenues within the local market through which agricultural entrepreneurs can sell their produce. These include exporters, agri-processors, manufacturers, hotels, supermarkets, inter alia. So domestically, food produce flows from the producers and fishers to retailers and wholesalers, where through these buyers and distributing entities, it reaches their consumers. Additionally, food produce can also flow directly to consumers from producers and or fishers through state-managed markets like the Coronation Market. And as you know, for the KMA region, we rely significantly on domestic food from the parishes of St. Elizabeth, Trelawney, Manchester, Westmoreland, and Clarendon. However, St. Elizabeth is the largest contributor to domestic production and has been labeled as the breadbasket parish of the island. Even though farmers or producers may travel into Kingston to sell their produce, the flow of domestic produce into the KMA typically occurs through a Higler system. And it is important to mention that the main direct sale points for fresh produce, including fruits, vegetables, and so on, are the Coronation Market, the Papine Market, and the AMC, which is the Agricultural Marketing Corporation, based on studies done by Kinlock et al. 2020. Then when the produce reaches these formal markets, between 60 and 70% are then redistributed through other wholesale markets in and around the parishes. In order to maximize their potential in the local market as farmers and investors, they can use to their advantage market intelligence that is provided by the government of Jamaica. And I must emphasize this point. Among these solutions are the JAMIS, which is the Jamaica Agricultural Marketing Information System, which provides weekly market information pertaining to over 50 agricultural products and prices, whether it be farm gate, municipal, wholesale, and retail. And also, it also mentions whether or not the type is local or imported. Secondly, there's the Jamaica Exporters Directory, 2021 to 2023, which provides a list of over 100 of Jamaica's registered exports and their different products. Nevertheless, as it relates to marketing systems, the most significant factor for success is the establishment of a symbiotic relationship between producers and the buyers. I've conducted several interviews with producers and fishers across the island, and a key challenge that they face is one, the producers and manufacturers and exporters need to see the farmers as their partners, not just a little man that they buy food produce from. And two, they need the contracts. And as the bank said, they need the contracts to get the loan, to go on the stock market, and to ultimately expand their businesses. In essence, there needs to be trust and mutual respect. On the other hand, the buyers are encouraging that the farmers need to further develop their capacity as producers, and there's currently a training program for farmers and producers that they can apply to, called the Farmers Organizations for African, Caribbean, and the Pacific. And the goal of this initiative is to provide organizations with the necessary skills to improve their business and marketing management for providing services to their members. So the farmers' organizations can reach out to the Department of Cooperative and Societies, RADA, and JAS, or reach out to the FO4 ACP team at fo4acp@fao.org. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stephenson. Moving on, our next presenter is Mr. Dieter Fischer. Did I get that correct? Or is it Fischer? It's Fischer. Is he here? Oh, he's online. He's online. Do we have him online? The signal, no, we don't. So we're going to be moving on. Our next presenter then will be Mr. Vivian Brown, the General Manager of SCJ Holdings Limited, and he'll be presenting on land availability for agricultural investment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're so late in the day that it is very reasonable to say all protocol is observed. And with saying that, I want to restart and say good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, both here at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel and also in Cyber World. Thank you. Right. Told them to unmask. Well, I have a little bit of presentation here. Oh, I'm the one who go through it? Right. Oh, I will just go through it. Basically, it's a few slides. What the slides do is that it just gives a little bit of background of how SCJ, and by the way, it's not Sugar Company, Holdings of Jamaica, there's no such entity. It is CJ Holdings Limited. Right, so it gives a little background of how we have taken the game, how we have been discharging our mandates, and question of going forward. I must say, if you look at agro-investment, agro-processing, anything like that, it has to start with the production of agricultural commodities. Production of agricultural commodities, a necessary condition for that is the availability of lands. But the availability of lands is not a sufficient condition for meeting our goals as far as agro-investment and agro-processing are concerned. What you need to look at in terms of the background is a question of the lands, the total amount of lands that we have, SCJ has under its control, we had verified to be about 137,000. And the last 4 years, we have accelerated the leasing of lands. It's interesting the last 4 fiscal years. It is interesting what the last 4 fiscal years mean, because it is in that period that most of the lands reverted to SCGH with the failure of this round of the sugar privatization program. And right, well, these are what we have leased, and tells you very important. The last sentence of this slide is that SCJ estimates now to have about 25,000 to 35,000 acres available. And it's interesting to know that, as you would imagine, the best lands are the ones which have gone first. So a lot of these lands which are left are not of the highest order. Some of them are marginal, but be that as it may. Now, I just want to say that SCJ's mission is to use this asset entrusted to it to support economic growth, job creation, and to facilitate entrepreneurship. How do we do this? We're seeking to repurpose these former sugar lands into productive activities, largely non-sugar. At the same time, our criteria for allocation of land can I read that right? Anyway, our criteria for the allocation of these lands for business purposes are two simple ones. One, that a proposal should be technically feasible and also financially viable. Now, what have been our experiences in this? And this is very important because, and this is where I just want to focus like 5.5 minutes from my starting, not from now. That is that as far as sitting here and listening, and I want to say, I think a seminar like this was very long overdue. And also, I think that with some of the challenges which have been placed and solutions have been placed on the table here, there's a need for you to have a round two. Nothing as grand as this, but with selected players, largely on the government side, we can decide who else included, so that we can actually move some of the challenges which we face and to move forward with the solutions. Because I want to say, on the basis of our experience at SCGH, there are some things to learn. One thing which we have said is that all applications for lands, either unsolicited bids or when we go out to tender, should be underpinned by a business plan. I want to tell you that it's sad, but so many business plans we get are not worth the paper on which they are written. I could use more demonstrative language, but not for here. But believe you me, they are not worth. Some people apply for lands with one email, with a 2-page letter. And sometimes when persons send in business plans, I'm saying, wow, you know, and we seek to redirect them. And all we have been redirecting persons to JBDC. But if AIC is offering this service, then we can direct them to you. I must say that I'm very happy to hear that you have done over 300 business plans over the last few weeks, but I wonder where have they been? But in terms of the government sector, in terms of the private sector, such as those who have been here, and I guess also our international development partner in FAO, and very importantly, those who are involved in finance. When I listened to them, I listened to all that, I said, oh, obviously many of the persons, let me tell you something. I'm shifting a little bit. I used to be in the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, and then in MICA. And one of the big challenges was to move the MSME sector forward. And one of the challenges on which we came, I used to be in MIIC and MICOF, and the MSME sector fell under us. And one of the challenges that we faced was, boy, MSME sector doesn't have financing, doesn't have adequate financing. And further, just say that where financing existed, that these players could not access the financing. It seems as if a similar thing in the agricultural sector. And I remember our minister then argued that we have to ensure that the MSME sector, that agriculture, that the people in agriculture were business people, were entrepreneurs. And many of the same challenges that the MSME sector face, they face the same challenges as part of that MSME sector, whether we wanted to recognize it or not. And in moving forward, we need to say, how do we assess this process? One, I heard the minister say, our minister now, he says he wants all idle lands in production. That's one. Secondly, I heard the Walker's Wood person say, one of their major dilemma, one of their major challenge right now is, will we have enough products to go forward in their business? Now, if we don't address some of the issues in the production side right now and the lands, we are going to have a problem. And it is for this reason that I think we need to take another look at this. I could regale you with like an after lunch speech about some of the MSME, some of the plans, the business plans we get. I mean, first of all, many of them do not even include a line for the cost of the acquisition of lands. Secondly, they include, many of them don't include land preparation costs. How on earth are you going to plant anything if you don't prepare the land? And of course, you have some granting. Somebody asks for 50 acres, and they say they have financing, and that financing is they have $4 million. And in the first 2 years, they spend $1 million each year. I mean, I don't know how that works. And, you know, I will say to you that this is available to you. This, in terms of a document which you prepared and which you made available to anybody who is interested, in terms of what SCJ would want to be able to make a decision for lands. And if you want to see it, it's listed on the website. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. Enjoy your meal.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We have Mr. Fischer online. And of course, Mr. Fischer happens to be the regional lead for advisory services in Latin America and the Caribbean International Finance Corporation, IFC.
Can you hear me? I'm unmuted now.
Yes, we are hearing you.
Great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, distinguished guests and participants, both in the room and online. I'm going to share my screen now. I hope you'll be able to see my presentation. Has it come up yet?
Yes, your screen is up.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm with the International Finance Corporation, and we are a member of the World Bank Group. We work with the private sector while the IBRD works with governments. And we have a number of investment products that we're able to offer the private sector. Our main product are loans, but we can also do equity, trade finance, and other types of finance, included blended finance, especially in areas that involve climate and gender. We can accompany our investments with technical advice, and the part of IFC I work for deals with technical advice to agribusinesses, and I'm responsible for Latin America. So we work with companies that are either current investment clients or prospective investment clients. And we work with these companies on supply chain issues, increasing the impact of the investment, advancing gender equality, as well as financial institutions. So we can either invest in off-takers or input companies like many of the participants in this conference. And we can also invest in financial institutions. And through those financial institutions, we can reach SMEs and individual farmers. And we also do public-private partnerships with governments. So in the agribusiness space, we have three main pillars. The most important and first is enhancing food security. And we look at enhancing food security on a global level. So both within particular countries, increasing productivity, but also in between countries and increasing international trade. The second pillar is to enhance inclusive growth and shared prosperity. So we want to enhance the growth of all the players in the value chain, beginning with inputs, production, processing, export, and even retail. So we have clients in all the different portions of the agricultural value chain. We work with a lot of small producer organizations and agricultural co-ops as aggregators of agricultural products. Our third pillar is sustainability. So IFC follows a set of performance standards which cover environmental and social practices. So all of our investments meet these performance standards. And if you want more information on that, our website has a detailed explanation of what the standards are. If you look at our overall portfolio, our most important region is Latin America. And if you look at the areas that we invest in on the left side, everything, as I said, from primary production, forestry, animal protein, packaged food, and beverages. So now I'd like to get a little bit into what we see as the demand for Jamaican agricultural products. And I think, previous speakers have covered many of these points, so I won't go into too much detail here, but I would draw your attention to the graphs on the right side. And what we've seen is the decline in the exports of traditional crops, but a rise in the exports of value-added crops, and especially, rum, beer, sauces, and other value-added products. So I think, for me, this is an indication that there's an appetite for Jamaican products in export markets, and particularly ones that are associated with the island and with its food culture. So we believe this is an area for growth amongst the diaspora, as well as other consumers in North America. The second market, which has also been mentioned, is the tourism sector, as well as domestic markets. And we believe that the tourism sector is going to rebound now that COVID is ending. And we hope that it's going to reach the levels that it was at previously. And we see a significant demand for a whole range of agricultural products, animal protein, meat, seafood, and poultry, as well as fruits, vegetables, and herbs, and a range of other products. And we think there's a great potential to substitute for imported products that are serving the tourism market. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about future trends that we see in agricultural demand globally. I think the most important trend that we see is a trend towards greater traceability. An earlier speaker mentioned the new regulations coming out of the European Union. And I think we're going to see similar regulations coming in many countries, which require that products are fully traceable back to their farm of production, so that we can screen for environmental and social risk. So when you look at environmental risk, we're often talking of deforestation. When we look at social risk, we may be talking about child labor. And so I think actually Jamaica is very well positioned here, because you don't have these same risks as many other countries. And so you can produce crops and have a traceability without environmental and social risk. The second point I would raise is reducing carbon footprint. We hear this word now, decarbonization. It wasn't even a word a year ago, and now you hear it practically every day. And more companies are looking to decarbonize their supply chains. So they want to understand how much carbon is being generated inside their supply chain, beginning with production. And so these companies are looking to introduce regenerative agriculture principles that improve soil health, increase carbon sequestration, and reduce input use. So again, I think Jamaica is well positioned for this new market. And then third, I feel that there's a great story of culture plus food coming from Jamaica. And I believe that that can be very attractive if it's properly advertised. And I think some of the earlier speakers are in this market, and I think there's space for many other innovative products and flavors. And this picture that I have here is actually coming from a hotel in Jamaica, and they're advertising their support for sustainable farming. So I see this as an area both for export and for the domestic market in tourism. And I think it's a high value market. And if we look at how we can transform these products into easy to use products, pre-peeling, this kind of thing, drying, and then also value add products like combining fruits and spices into sauces and other ingredient products. So thank you very much. And I would urge you, if you have projects that you would like the IFC to consider, You can find the email address on our website, and we have offices in Kingston as well. So we're anxious to interact with agribusinesses, and we're always looking for new investment opportunities. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fischer. And let me ask this question before we move on to our next presenters. A question for you, Mr. Fischer. How can we access your services?
So we have an email address on the website for the Jamaica office. Please feel free to email us, and we have a physical location in Kingston and in Court Lake Plaza. So please also make an appointment and stop by. I would say that, our investment size tends to be probably on the larger size. So we interact with smaller businesses and individual farmers through our banking clients. So we do have clients in Jamaica, and we can interact potentially through those financial institutions or with larger firms, direct investment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a question for Mr. Brown of SCJ Holdings Limited. Mr. Brown, one of our participants is asking, will you lease your land to persons who want to erect buildings like factories and processing facility? And I also have another question for you. I'm just going to throw them both at the same time. Who do we contact at the SCJ for assistance of a proposal that was submitted?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Well, I'd say right now, the easiest person you can contact is me, and I will pass that information on to the relevant section that is with it. And you could always pass on my information. In terms of lands, generally what the government's policy is that lands for agriculture should not be sold. But usually what happens, if persons come and have an agricultural proposal and one part of it, I should say agro-processing, you can buy lands to establish an agro-processing facility. The footprint for such lands not very large, and we have gone through those processes. Additionally, if someone wants to lease lands and to have an agro-processing facility assigned to it, there's a provision for the lands on which the agro-processing facility are located that can be sold, because clearly the investor would require an appropriate amount of time to recoup his or her or their investment. So I hope that answers the question, John.
And we have one final question for Mr. Cheaz Pelaez. And this question is for you. For FAO, are you taking new farmers?
Okay. Well, as FAO, we're an organization that supports farmers to empower them to develop skills in relation to what I presented. What we try to do is to work with government and with private sector to see how best farmers can be brought into contractual, more formalized contractual terms into any particular activity that would allow for the efficiencies that are required by the market and by the private sector. But if the question is related to a particular provision of a service or a product, we don't engage directly with individual farmers. We try to promote the organizational capacities of farmers, so that they can play better in markets and also to enhance their skills in agricultural production and other areas that are critical for having a more level playing field, between them and their stakeholders in the value chain.
Thank you so much. And the final part that I'll ask you, how then can we be a part of the turmeric and ginger projects?
Oh, it is a part. We actually have managed to, what I just said, we have done it with the turmeric and ginger intervention. We are working with agro-processors in Jamaica and other buyers, and they have, we have identified government support the most, farmers, and we have assisted in them engaging through some sort of formal contracts with the buyers for provision of ginger and turmeric on the specific conditions that are determined, by the value chain. So in fact, we have assisted to link them to market.
And I think that rounds out our question and answers for this group. Thank you all so much.